everybody. My name is Kairav Joshi, and I would like to welcome you to our preview lesson for my upcoming course, Provoking and Attacking Targets. This is a new live course I will be teaching early in April. The date has to be decided still, but I will keep you posted. But today I wanted to spend some time and give you some idea what kinds of topics we will be covering, and we'll give you one fun example that we'll go through today. The course topic is provoking and attacking targets. Today we'll focus more on attacking targets and I would say identifying those targets. So I hope you enjoy that. Let's go ahead and get started. So my example for you today is the opera game, a very well-known game played by Paul Morphy against the Duke of Brunswick and Count Isouard, who I believe was French. They played this game in the late 1800s, and, well, I would say it's one of Paul Morphy's best games. And it's highly instructive for our topic, which is attacking targets. So we'll look at the opera game, but we will also look at some possible sidelines that could have happened in those positions and do some practice where we try to identify targets, how to attack those targets, and maybe learn a couple of things. So the opera game starts with the move e4, e5 from black, knight f3, and pawn to d6. This is the Philidor defense. The d6 move here is known to be solid. It is playable. However, it is not the strongest move. Black has better options here. The main move, of course, is knight to c6. There are also options such as the Petrov here with knight f6, and those two moves are the most principled. d6 blocks this bishop in a bit early, so it's a little bit passive compared to the other options, but okay, it's a solid move, and that is what black played in this game. Paul Morphy played d4, which is a very strong forcing move, attacking the e5 pawn. Well, the e5 pawn is now threatened because white has two attackers, and black only has one defender. So already, black has to be careful and play accurately. It's easiest for black to play a move like e takes d4 and just get rid of that tension in the center. But if he doesn't want to do that, he can also develop a new piece and try to defend that pawn. So perhaps he can play the move knight d7 here and try to defend the pawn in that manner. Besides knight d7, perhaps he could try knight f6 to counterattack by attacking our e-pawn. Whenever you have an undefended pawn, like in our case, the e4 pawn, or an under-defended pawn, like black's e-pawn, well, those are always potential targets, and so either black can take care of his pawn, or he can counterattack ours, and those are the two main options besides trading pawns right here. The move knight c6 to attack our pawn isn't that good of an option, and the reason is if you analyze forcing moves, already white gains some advantage here. Well, you can play a move like pawn to d5, and of course you have some space advantage in the center. That's a good move for you. But you can even take on e5 here, and after black takes, we take, black takes, we take, and already white has some advantage because black has lost the right to castle. Now that's not a big deal here because the queens are off the board and there aren't any dynamics going for white just yet. So it's not end of the world for black. At the same time, white is happy here and white has some advantage. So typically e takes d4 is played. However, what black played here was a bit unusual. Black played the move bishop g4. What is that? Well, with bishop g4, the idea was to pin and therefore deactivate this knight, which would reduce pressure on e5 and also get rid of one defender of d4. Also, if you look at forcing options for black, he can take the knight, and if we recapture with the queen, well, not only is the knight gone, which was defending our pawn, but so is the queen. The queen's also gone. And so perhaps black had an idea where he would try to get our queen to f3 and then win the d pawn for free. After bishop g4, of course, it is white's turn to move, and white can play the move d takes e5 here, which is the best move. That's what Paul Morphy played in the game. We went ahead and grabbed this pawn, and well, we're up a pawn at the moment, right? Black cannot just recapture this pawn, because if that happens, we can take the queen, king takes d8, and now knight takes e5 happens, and black is dropping material. So what black played here after d takes e5 is bishop takes f3, taking our knight. Paul Morphy played queen takes f3, and now d takes e5 was played. And now we can really begin talking about our topic. Our topic is attacking targets. And for that we have to first identify targets. So what are targets? Well, targets can be weak squares. They can be weak pawns. They could even be any weak pieces, including the king, if the king is vulnerable. So they're all types of weaknesses. But in the starting position, the beginning of the game, f7 and f2 are often the most vulnerable squares. They're very weak because these squares are only defended by the king normally in the starting position. Well, as white's already aiming at that weakness, right, on f7. So there is some pressure there already. But that's not a big deal in itself, right? I mean, okay, we're attacking a pawn, it's defended, and black can just block. But at least we have identified a potential weak point. Now, what else could be a target? Again, any weak square, weak pawn, anything that is not sufficiently defended could be a weakness, which would be a target for us. So what else is undefended here for black? Well, this pawn is undefended. This pawn is also undefended. Are there any weak pieces? Well, he hasn't developed anything yet, so I'm not able to attack those pieces directly. So I guess the only potential weak piece is the king if we get something on f7, right? If we have an attack there. Well, it is white to move, and what I recommend you do now is pause for a moment and try to find the best move for white. What do you think white should play here? What are some weaknesses for black? And how can you attack them? Okay, hopefully you had a chance to think. The best move here for white is bishop to c4. Bishop c4 develops a new piece with a mating attack. The bishop and the queen combined are now threatening to deliver checkmate on f7. At the same time, white improved his position because the bishop has now been developed. And what black played in this game was knight to f6, which appears to be the most principled move, right? I mean, you have a mating threat here. if you play knight f6, you have developed a new piece, and you have blocked the queen's attack. So initially this looks good, but the mistake black made is that black is not thinking about white's forcing responses. You don't make moves just to resolve the current problem, right? Solving f7 is important, but that's not the only issue. Before you make a move, you have to think about what else your opponent can do, right? Do you have other weaknesses that your opponent can attack? What are the forcing ideas and forcing moves available to your opponent? Now, what does that mean? Forcing moves simply means checks, captures, or threats. And those types of moves take you to other positions by force. And so you have to be aware of the forcing options for your opponent at every position. When black played knight f6, he thought everything was fine. But that's not true. He missed a forcing move that takes advantage of black's weaknesses and attacks the targets. Which move would that be? Again, go ahead and pause the video and let me know, or let yourself know, I would say, because we're not live, but let yourself know what you would play as white. Okay, and hopefully you had enough time to think. After knight f6, the best move is queen to b3. What are we doing here? Well, we were analyzing our forcing moves and attacking undefended pawns or under-defended pawns, our forcing ideas, and that makes queen b3 a forcing move. We have two threats. There's a nice target on b7 and also on f7. But the f7 attack is not just a target, it's a mating attack actually. For example, let's say black just pushes a pawn here. Well, bishop takes f7 happens, we win the pawn, and it doesn't matter where the king goes. Either way, you have checkmate. So that's not so good for black. Very good for white. He cannot play b6. He must defend the f7 pawn. Now, there are different ways to try that. I guess there's, well, two main options, queen e7 or queen d7. In this game, queen e7 was played, but I want to show you queen d7 very quickly. If queen d7 is played, covering this pawn, we can now play queen takes b7, and that target is now gone because we won it. Free pawn for us, plus we attack the rook. Is there a way black can try to defend the rook? Yes, there is. Black can play the move queen to c6, attacking our queen and indirectly defending the rook. But this move has a problem. Queen c6 has a problem. The problem is that if you analyze forcing moves for white, which you should do, meaning go ahead and pause the video. So if you analyze moves for white here, you will see there's a forcing move which wins on the spot. And that move is bishop b5. Because the queen itself becomes a target here. You simply play bishop to b5. The king is stuck in the center. The king and queen are on the same diagonal, which is a bad thing when there's a bishop alive for the opponent on the same colored square. Bishop b5, the queen is gone. Black could resign. So the count and the duke did not play that. They played queen e7 instead. And after queen e7, Paul Morphy played knight to c3. A good developing move, of course. And, well, the obvious question is, why didn't white take on b7? I think the reason that Paul Morphy didn't take on b7 is because he wanted a mating attack. He wanted to checkmate the Duke and the Count. If queen takes b7 was played, white does win the pawn and is much better. There's no doubt about that. But black could force the queens off the board. Queen b4 check, queen takes, bishop takes, and well, there's no middle game mating attack anymore. But white would be winning this endgame regardless. A move like knight c3 is sufficient here. One would think that, wait, doesn't black have a way to win back the pawn? For example, can't he just take the knight, forcing moves for black? After we take back, what if he just grabs this pawn? Looks like black is recovering. Well, we must analyze that, of course. It turns out white has a forcing response to a move like knight e4. So I would like you to spend a moment here and calculate this variation. After knight to c3, bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and knight takes e4. Visualize that position, and in that position, what are some potential targets? Go ahead and pause the video. Well, if you look at black's pieces in that resulting position, this knight on e4 would be undefended. The rook is undefended. This rook is undefended, but not within our reach. But I am highly interested in this rook and this knight. They're on the same diagonal, and okay, we lose some material here when the trades happen. The knight's gone, black's bishop's gone, but our own bishop on c4 is alive. And this bishop now activates by going bishop d5, attacking both of those weaknesses, both of those targets. So always look out for how you can attack undefended pieces. Okay? Again, to show you this, if you couldn't keep up with the calculation here, bishop takes c3, pawn takes, and if knight takes, well, now you can play bishop d5, and black will drop a piece. Okay? And if black instead castles or does something else, well, now I can play maybe just bishop d2, no more doubled pawns for me, and pawn to f3 is next, so it seems like white is easily winning. But again, I think Paul Morphy wanted to win this in the middle game, so he played knight to c3 instead, avoiding the queen trade. After knight to c3, c6 was played, bishop g5 was played by Paul Morphy. This, of course, pins the knight to the queen. And now b5 was played by black, attacking the c4 bishop. Now, again, in any position, you have to analyze forcing moves. What do you think Paul Morphy played in this position?